and welcome to the 6th video in my series on the basics of the music business. This time we're going to investigate distribution. As I've mentioned before, content is king, and that means not just owning and controlling your work, but also knowing what to do with it. I will show you the various ways that you can get your work out there to the public from digital to vinyl, but first of all, let's take a look at what it is you will actually be distributing. To begin with, let's just take another look at master right, because as we know, content is king. A record label invests money in the recording of an artist and therefore owns that specific recording. This is the master. Master ownership allows a record label to create and distribute pressings, allow digital distribution, make license deals with other labels, release compilation albums and back catalogue tracks, and license the master to third parties for other purposes. The record label does not control the copyright of the intellectual property encompassed in that recording. In most cases, in order for a label to make any kind of deal with a third party, either another label in a different territory or with a media producer and film for example, then the third party will also need both permission from the work's publisher as well as some kind of right over any publishing income generated in his territory or from his media. In other words, master right ownership and publishing control go hand in hand, and when it comes to making deals you can't have one without the other. This is the famous master and publishing deal. So, obviously, we need to be able to identify each individual master. And we do that using a thing called the ISRC, the International Standard Recording Code. An ISRC code is made up of a number of elements, which, in combination, create a unique identifier for every master recording. We begin with the country code, followed by the company code, which is unique to you, the year of release, and your own catalogue number. It's important to remember that every new version of the original master, a remix for example, would constitute a new master and would have to have its own ISRC. If you record your own work, in your own studio for example, and the end result is a releasable track, then you are your own master owner and have all of the rights associated with that recording, including the right to assign your own ISRC. In addition to the ISRC, every released recording will also have a barcode, also known as the Universal Product Code or the International European Article Number. It goes something like this. Every released final product will have a UPC code, and contained within that UPC code, as with this example in a CD album, are all of the individual works, the masters, each with their own individual ISRC code. So we can see that when it comes to tracking sales, the UPC or the EAN identifies the overall product. An album would have one UPC with each individual track having a unique ISRC. This also applies to digital downloads, and even a single track release will still need a UPC for sales tracking purposes. For example, a 10-track album would have a single UPC that would identify the collection of songs, the masters, that it contains. But if one of those songs were to be released separately as a single, it would need a new UPC, although the ISRC would remain the same. In this way, the reporting of a download sale would be easily identifiable as either a single track download from the album or as a download of the track in its single format. So, if you've ever wondered why download portals still require the same barcode that used to be used on the physical CD you bought at the record store, that's why. It's all about tracking sales and linking specific titles to specific projects. Using an aggregator. Aggregators are those really handy companies that help you and me get our music online to all of the digital portals in one simple upload. But they are so much more than that. They also provide sales data. It works something like this. Like I say, aggregators are an invaluable source of data and make use of that data that is made available to you. Most aggregators offer widgets for your own website. Use them. Create links on your own social network to your pages on your aggregator site. Compare sales data from the aggregator with your own Google Analytics data. And make full use of the tools like the iTunes trending option offered by some aggregators. This may sound surprising, but there are data systems out there that you can use, but you have to populate them. For example, Gracenote and FreeDB. These are database systems that are used to feed CD data to radio and TV shows as well as digital portals such as iTunes. The song information that appears on the screen of your car radio is being served to the station by Gracenote. Check that your CD data is up to date on these systems. And some aggregators automatically serve these systems. Going into the public domain. We looked at Creative Commons in the lesson on publishing, but it's worth going over it again just to reiterate. Sharing your music is a good way of promoting yourself, but if you have not registered your works with the Copyright Society, you have no legal protection under copyright law. Many copyright societies will not accept a track for registration if it has been made available online via a CC license or simply put out in the public domain via Facebook or other social media. Why not? Well, look at it from their point of view. They have a legal mandate under law to provide protection for copyrighted works, and they can only do that if they can track and trace a work's usage and have such usages reported to them. Physical release. So now things start to get expensive. Most reputable digital aggregators will also handle physical release in some form or other, although mostly this will be limited to selling physical content via their web stores. Pure physical distribution is still in the hands of the majors. EMI, for example, has the largest physical distribution system in the world. These days, physical distribution is somewhat limited by the lack of retail outlets to take the content. Most physical distribution now includes online retail outlets such as Amazon.com, CD Universe, etc. But remember, distributors will normally charge around about 30% of the PPD as their fee. In other words, pretty much what Apple charges on iTunes. 30% has been the standard distribution percentage for decades. So what is the PPD? It's the purchase or publish price to dealer. And this is the amount the retail outlet will pay the supplier for each disc sold. It is not the retail price. An album retailing at £17.99 will have a PPD of around £11.99. The £6 difference is the retail outlet's profit margin. Mechanical royalties are usually PPD based. MTPS, for example, calculates its rates based on standard PPDs. Record label artist percentages are also PPD based. If an artist is earning a 15% royalty on sales, that's 15% of the PPD, not the retail price over the counter. Beware, mechanical copyright societies base their fees on PPD. However, for large-scale pressing runs for major labels, the fees can be retroactive. In other words, not based on PPD, but on unit sales declared, which can cause big delays in royalty payments. Streaming. So, is streaming still distribution? Well, yes, but it is not a sale. No ownership is implied to the consumer. Even when a track is available via a paid subscription account, Spotify Premium for example, or Apple Music, you do not own the track, even though it can actually be downloaded onto your device. It is simply what is known as a tethered download, available to you as long as you keep paying your monthly subscription. Stop paying and the service pulls on the tether and yanks the track back. It is similar to broadcast, but not covered by the same rules. Streaming is the fastest growing music service ever known, and it is having a massive impact on physical sales. In the US in 2022, CD album sales dropped to only 33.4 million units, from its peak of 942.5 million units back in 2000. Also in the US in 2022, download album sales dropped to only 23.9 million units, from their peak of 118 million unit sales in 2013. Music streaming revenue in 2022, both subscription and ad-supported, reached $17.5 billion. So let's have a look at Spotify. Spotify only accepts music from labels and distributors with whom it has agreements in place. This is to ensure that the content they broadcast is legal, fully licensed and trackable to a signed artist. This list includes aggregators such as TuneCore, Independent Digital, CD Baby, etc., etc. The Spotify rate is variable, based on the idea of a per stream value, and is calculated in a way that reflects an artist's popularity. The calculation is actually quite complex, but is still based on the principle of a master and publishing deal. In effect, it's a master and publishing payout equivalent to 70% of the calculation, Spotify monthly revenue, times artist streams divided by total streams. If an artist has a record deal, then Spotify will take the artist percentage into account and include that in the calculation. If not, the amount declared to the label or rights owner is the full amount, and the label must make its own split based on the artist's contract. On the other hand, as we've seen previously, not all artists approve of Spotify. Taylor Swift, for example, has been very vocal on the subject, and back in 2015, Tom York of Radiohead had this to say: "Spotify is the last fart of a dying corpse." When it comes to YouTube and YouTube Music, this is where things can get very complex indeed. Because YouTube is primarily a visual medium, with music used occasionally as a supporting medium, the payments become very difficult to determine. However, some copyright societies, PRS being the leader, have made agreements with Google, owners of YouTube, to make royalty payments. Aggregators such as CD Baby, for example, also have deals in place with YouTube on the basis of a performing royalty. In fact, most copyright societies now have agreements in place with Google, whereby Google declares all of its YouTube plays to each individual copyright society, and each society has a financial deal in place, much like a broadcast license fee, that Google pays on a quarterly basis. The end result is a system of micropayments that are made to the copyright owners per territory. The actual amount is very variable, more so than Spotify, and is mostly the subject of some closely guarded negotiations. As we've seen in previous lessons, some aggregators have deals with a company called Rumblefish, who have digital license technology solutions in place at YouTube and elsewhere. These licenses are based on micropayment to compensate for a synchronization fee. YouTube Music, on the other hand, can be seen as another standard streaming service, accessible via aggregators in the normal way, with revenue based on a share of the subscription fees or the ad-supported revenue. In the case of digital distribution, sync fees are almost impossible to apply, especially with so much user-generated content on portals such as YouTube. As you can see from the example here, Rumblefish uses a very similar calculation model to Spotify, although they do not disclose exactly what it is, and as you can see, it produces some very variable results. We will look at sync fee payments, who pays them and how to get them in the next lesson. But for now, as usual, here are those useful links. So, that about wraps it up for distribution. Feel free to look back over the previous lessons to see how all of this comes together. In the next and final video in the public part of this series, I will show you some of the more obscure but ultimately more lucrative aspects of the music business as we take a look at music licensing. As usual, be sure to like and, if you haven't already by now, subscribe. And of course, you can also support us on patreon.com/Lavender Vale, where you will find some more exclusive content from this series. Thanks for listening.